Hello friends, I welcome you all back to my channel. Today let us focus on another version of formalism, that is the Anglo-American New Criticism. While seeing formalism as a form of literary criticism, we have already observed that the movement began with I.A. Richards' practical criticism. And we also know that the formalist literary criticism developed into two different schools, the Russian formalism and then the Anglo-American New Criticism. Today we focus on this new criticism where the texts are considered to be closed and autonomous. That is to say, everything that is to be learned from a text is just within it and we need not search for anything beyond the text. New criticism in particular developed because of a few American critics, and it happened after the First World War, that is from the 1940s to the 1960s. Same like Russian formalism, which has its own set of critics, we see that Anglo-American New Criticism also has its set of critics. It first developed in the hands of I.A. Richards, as I mentioned earlier, and this happened when I.A. Richards was working at the Cambridge University. Another important contributor to New Criticism is F.R. Lewis. New critics particularly wanted to avoid impressionistic criticism, that is the opinion of one critic or a set of people's opinions always associated with a particular text. New critics attempted to systematize the study of literature, same like many other fields of study being systematized. New criticism became a much popular way of literary reading in the mid-20th century, that is in the 1940s and 1950s. This formalist way of reading received its name from John Crowe Ransom's 1941 book, The New Criticism. New critics treat a work of literature as if it is a self-contained and self-referential object. That is, they do not base their interpretations of the text on either the reader's response or the author's stated intentions, or they do not even draw any parallels between the text and its historical context, such as the author's life. They concentrate completely on the relationships within the text that give it its own distinctive character or form. The three books which have made a huge contribution to New Criticism are I.A. Richards' Practical Criticism, which was published in 1929, William Empson's 7 Types of Ambiguity, which was published in 1930, and T.S. Eliot's The Function of Criticism, which was published in 1933. The other contributors to New Criticism are R.P. Blackmore, Cleanth Brooks, John Crowe Ransom, Alan Tate, Robert Penn Warren, and William K. Wimsatt. New Criticism includes two concepts called intentional fallacy and affective fallacy. Affective fallacy is to read from the reader's perspective, that is to identify the effect of a text on the reader. Reading a text from the author's perspective or connecting it to author's life or any incident that has occurred in his or her life become intentional fallacy according to the new critics. In both these perspectives, the reading becomes subjective, and hence the dictates of the new criticism for a reading to be objective fails. Thus, new criticism rejects both these kinds of reading. New criticism pays close attention to the internal characteristics of a text, like the rhythm, meter, theme, imagery, metaphor, etc. It discourages the use of external evidence to explain any literary work. S.T. Coleridge was the first person to elaborate the concept of a poem as a unified and organic whole, which, after many internal conflicts, achieved some final balance or harmony at the end. These considerations are further integrated in Cleanth Brooks' work, The Well-Wrought Urn, which was published in 1947. American New Criticism shares many characteristics with Russian formalism, but it actually arose independent of the Russian school. New critics are interested in finding the harmony of the work, the order in which it is arranged, the tension that it creates in the minds of the readers, the paradoxes that it presents, the ambivalence, that is, having simultaneous conflicting reactions, beliefs, or feelings towards anybody or anything. So, the ambivalence that is portrayed in a particular text, and also sometimes ambiguity. Ambiguity is the quality of being open to more than one interpretation. New critics are primarily concerned with the language that is used in the text and the organization that a writer intends while writing the text. New critics focus on poetry and not on fiction. They deal with how a work can be read objectively and accurately by examining the structure and form. New critics conclude that there is only one single or correct interpretation of a text. New critics are not concerned with the biography of the author, historical context of a text, the social conditions in which the text was produced, or the effects that a text has on the reader, and also in the content of the text, that is, the message that a text would be conveying to the readers. The notable theorists of Anglo-American New Criticism include John Crowe Ransom, I.A. Richards, William K. Wimsatt, William Empson, T.S. Eliot, R.P. Blackmore, Cleanth Brooks, John Crowe Ransom, Alan Tate, Robert Penn Warren, and Monroe Beardsley. New criticism has its origin in the early seminal works of the English writers, like I.A. Richards' Practical Criticism, which was published in 1929, and William Empson's 7 Types of Ambiguity in 1930. Another English poet, T.S. Eliot, has also made contributions to New Criticism with his critical essays Tradition and the Individual Talent, published in 1917, and another essay, Hamlet and His Problems, published in 1919. John Crowe Ransom, in his book The New Criticism, which was published in 1941, provided an overview of the work of all the key new critics, including I.A. Richards, T.S. Eliot, William Empson, and Ivor Winters. Few other notable new critics are F.R. Lewis, Kenneth Burke, Alan Tate, Cleanth Brooks, and Rene Wellek. New critics solely focused on poetry and not on fiction. Though during the 19th and 20th centuries there were many fiction writers, New criticism focused just on poetry because they found poetry to be a special kind of discourse. New critics tried to define and formalize the qualities of poetic thought and language. New criticism was primarily concerned with the language, that is the verbal meaning, and the organization, that is the overall structure of a text. New criticism voted for the technique of close reading, with special emphasis on connotative and associative values of words and on the multiple functions of the figurative language, including the symbol, metaphor, and image. New critics believed that the poetic form and content could not be separated. One of the noted new critics, Cleanth Brooks, in his book The Well-Wrought Urn, coined the phrase the heresy of paraphrase, which means that the meaning of a work of art can be paraphrased. Here in this book, following the argument of Benedetto Croce, Cleanth Brooks argues that the work of art and its meaning can be paraphrased, but it cannot be translated into any other language. Once translated, when the sound, rhythm, and arrangement of words change, it becomes a new text, he says. Few notable works that have contributed to new criticism include I.A. Richards' Principles of Literary Criticism. In this book, Richards closely reasons out the theory of the mind's response to rhythm and meter. Based on his experiments conducted in Cambridge, Richards wrote another book called Practical Criticism and published in 1929. In this book, he analyzes the factors responsible for misreading of poems. This is also an important contribution of him to new criticism. William Empson, another new critic, wrote a book called 7 Types of Ambiguity, which he published in 3 different series. In these books, he reads poetry as an exploration of conflicts within the author, and he discusses the 7 types of ambiguity that a reader finds in a book. He observes the book to be a puzzle which has different meanings or alternative views which are taken into consideration without misreading. Though at a later stage, T.S. Eliot criticized the intensely detailed analysis of texts of new criticism, In his essays, Tradition and Individual Talent and Hamlet and His Problems, he shares the same focus on the aesthetic and stylistic qualities of poetry rather than on its ideological content. John Crow Ransom's essay, Criticism Incorporated, talks about the do's and don'ts of a new critic. Ontology is the branch of philosophy that studies concepts such as existence, being, becoming, and reality. It includes the questions of how entities are grouped into basic categories and which of these entities exist on the most fundamental level. John Crow Ransom, in his essay Poetry, a Note in Ontology, uses this philosophy to locate the special and essential character of poetry, not merely with the background or origins of a poem. Same like John Crow Ransom's essay Criticism Incorporated, Ellen Tate's essay Miss Emily and the Bibliographer also aimed to exclude the reader's response, the author's intention, historical and cultural context of the text, and moralistic bias of the readers from their analysis. In their essays, The Intentional Fallacy and The Affective Fallacy, both William K. Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley explain as to how a writer's intention or a reader's background affects the writing or reading of a poem. Hence, they advise the complete focus on the text without knowing either the writer's or the reader's background. Considering the earlier historical or biographical based interpretation of different texts, Cleanth Brooks, in his book The Well-Wrought Urn, Studies in the Structure of Poetry, rejects such criticism and votes for evaluating each writer according to the standards of the age of the critic or the reader. Thus, through new criticism, it can be said that some books which have seemed important for a very long period of time may lose their importance, and certain books which have been neglected over time can gain more of importance as time passes. Robert Penn Warren's essay, Pure and Impure Poetry, defines his belief, persisting all through his creative life, in the necessary tension between the ideal and the real, the abstract and the relative, and his belief in the poetics of purity or impurity. René Wellek and Austin Warren, in their book Theory of Literature, suggest that neither a purely objective nor a purely subjective approach would be able to properly describe literature. Thus, with different perspectives presented in each of their books and essays, all these critics contributed to the development of new criticism. T.S. Eliot is considered to be the single most influential figure behind new criticism. His essay, Tradition and Individual Talent, that was written in 1919, became the building block for the much of Anglo-American criticism. In this essay, Eliot argues that writers must have the historical sense, which can be seen as a sense of tradition. Historical sense does not mean the critic or the reader looking for the writer's background here. Eliot in his essay argues that poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. Thus, it becomes not an expression of personality, but an escape from the actual personality of the poem. Eliot in his essay emphasized on science, objectivity, and impersonality while reading a text. Another major proponent of new criticism is Ivor Armstrong Richards, popularly known as I.A. Richards. He is well known for his works The Meaning of Meaning, Principles of Literary Criticism, and Practical Criticism. He observed poetry as psychological and not cognitive. He tried to observe the use of language in poetry. In his fascinating experiment, Richards rejected all the extra-textual information like the author's details, the period of publication or writing, or any explanatory commentary. His only intention was to make readers respond to poems that were thus completely stripped of their context. which he named this criticism as practical criticism and further discussed more about it in his book Practical Criticism. For anybody in his place, it would have been very difficult to think of a more text-oriented approach. Cleanth Brooks, in his book The Well-Wrought Urn, proposes how he believed that new critics should be objective and scientific in their criticism. He mentions paradox as the most important language and literary convention in poetry, and he therefore claims that paradox should be an intellectual rather than emotional content of writing. F.R. Lewis, by profession, was a teacher at the Cambridge University. He was not entirely a new critic, but his close analysis of the poem itself, that is just the words on the page, and his belief that a poem should be self-sustaining, support the idea of new criticism, and hence he is studied under new criticism. He was actually influenced by T.S. Eliot and Matthew Arnold. The major works of F.R. Lewis include The Common Pursuit, The Great Tradition, Revaluation, and Education and the University. While new criticism was dominant in the 1940s and 1950s, Lewisite criticism became dominant in the 1970s. The key terms used in new criticism include close reading. It is the detailed analysis of the text itself to arrive at an interpretation without referring to the historical, authorial, or cultural concerns of the text. In this kind of reading, close attention is paid to individual words, theme, imagery, metaphor, rhythm, meter, etc. that are contained within the poem. It is a scrupulous examination of the formal elements. In other words, it involves intrinsic reading of the text. Some of the principles of new criticism are derived from Samuel Taylor Coleridge because he was the first one to elaborate on the concept of the poem as a unified organic whole which reconciled its internal conflicts and achieved some fine balance or harmony. Intentional fallacy. This is the mistake of attempting to understand the author's intentions while interpreting a literary work. The design or intention of the author is neither available nor desirable as a standard for judging a literary work. New criticism stresses close attention to the internal characteristics of the text itself and not the intentions of the writer. It warns the reader against critical practices which divert the attention from the poem itself, and hence disclaims both the personal input of the writer, that is the intention, and the emotional effect on the reader, that is the affect, in order to study the words on the page, that is the literary work. Affective fallacy. This is the mistake of equating a work with its emotional effects upon the audience. New criticism says that a text should never be understood in relation to the responses of its readers, and thus the critic must base his analysis on the text's intrinsic dimensions and not its effects on the readers. While emphasizing on the close reading of the work and the technical vocabulary of it, new criticism asserts that the goal of literature is not the pursuit of sincerity or authenticity of the writer, but the subtlety, unity, and integrity of the text. These are seen as properties of the text and not of the author. In order to apply new criticism, one has to start examining the text for its form. A critic has to choose one or two specific aspects of the text and try to focus on it, identifying how each of these aspects affect the meaning of the piece of literature. Here are a few do's and don'ts of new criticism. A few typical questions that a new critic might have to answer while reading a text. A few books for references. And a few multiple choice questions. Thank you.